bandwidth provided by Recursive Squirrel Interactive. Visit them on the web at recursivesquirrel.com. Episode 605, Yet Another Conspiracy Theory. September 21st, 2020. It's time for this week's edition of the BeanCast, a weekly discussion about the news and issues facing marketers today. I'm your host, Bob Norton. Thanks for joining us. TikTok, along with WeChat, have been banished from the app stores. Or to be more specific, U.S. users can still use the platforms, for now, but can no longer download the apps. How will all this impact marketers? Tonight we'll discuss. Also, how Google may be getting off light, whether seasonality has become a thing of the past, how iOS 14 is going to rat you out, plus this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. That's the lineup. Let's meet tonight's panel. Thanks for joining us for this week's BeanCast. I'm Bob Norp, and with me on the panel for this evening, we start with the founder and principal of the Idea Integration Company, Mr. Saul Colt. Hi, Saul.
Hey, Bob. Excited to be here tonight.
Excited to have you here. Now, next, we have the host of The Wendy Cooper Show and the Daily 5 podcast, direct response expert and founder of C-Spot Run Productions, Ms. Wendy Cooper. Hi, Wendy.
Hey, Bob. Thanks for having me tonight.
You're welcome. And finally, he's the host of the daily online show Corona TV, brand innovation consultant, Mr. Joseph Jaffe is here. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Bob, and I'm so happy that you're back on the air.
Yeah, I did take off those few weeks as I moved, but I'm all settled here. The room's a little echoey, but we're working on it. We're working on our acoustics and everything like that. But well, let's jump right into the topics. And the news was just awash with TikTok news this past week. As of the time of the downloading and listening of this podcast for most of you, TikTok, along with WeChat, will no longer be available for download in the U.S., with the ultimate goal of officially banning their U.S. operations by November. Now, Saul, we know that a lot of this is politically driven for various reasons. The President of the United States thinks that TikTok is a national security issue. But you got to take a grain of salt here, and you got to think whether or not there is a grain of truth with all of this. And is there any merit to the concerns over national security because of these apps? I mean, is there a legitimate reason to be worried about the Chinese involvement with both TikTok and WeChat?
So Bob, this story is literally changing by the hour. So, my understanding right now is that the delay or the ban has been, avoided and everybody can still use it. And even if it was going to be banned, it didn't really matter if you'd already had it downloaded on your phone. You weren't going to be affected. It would just be new people who were just discovering for the first time. But short version of the whole story is 76-year-old Larry Ellison wanted to buy his 25-year-old girlfriend of 7 years her favorite app. So he basically went out and bought it with Walmart. Back in August, in an effort to make America great again, Trump signed an executive order to ban TikTok, and the ban was going to take place today, September 20th, the day we're recording this. Most people will hear it tomorrow. His administration felt and had concerns without a U.S.-based owner, the app could be used as a spying tool for the Chinese government. Whether that's possible or not, of course it's possible, but if anyone's seen the documentary on Netflix, The Social Dilemma, we should probably be a little bit more worried about U.S. owned properties than a bunch of kids making dance videos and stuff like that. But that's a whole other conversation. So basically, because they were worried about possible spying, they started a gun to the head deal to sell the U.S. operation, and Trump made it very clear that he had to approve the sale of this, which is completely unfounded and never before happened. Yes, companies have to go through monopoly cases and the U.S.
Antitrust.
Trade Commission. What?
Antitrust
Yeah, antitrust
regulation.
and stuff like that. But never before has a president had to approve a sale of a company, which is ridiculous. It's not order. It's not standard operating procedure. But perhaps this is what it takes to ensure that one of your biggest campaign contributors will get the bid over Microsoft. Microsoft, of course, was the one that was favorited to buy TikTok and made the sort of the loudest rumbling. So
am I understanding you correctly in that between when I got this script all written and when we started, that the news has actually changed and this is no longer going to be banned from the App Store? I'm already behind on this.
Yeah, you're already behind. There, a judge stopped the ban for 7 days, and then in between that, Oracle and Walmart have partnered, and a deal has been expected to be accepted. So Oracle, Larry Ellison, and Walmart partnership that they're going to call the company something like, I don't know, it's like TikTok Global or something like that, is going to be the American owner of TikTok, and they are going to basically own the company. But so yes, things have changed, and they're sort of still changing by the minute. But the bigger complication here is, it's not about social media. It's not about Larry Ellison's 25-year-old girlfriend. He's 76, by the way. Do the math. It's not about his 25-year-old girlfriend dancing on TikTok. It really is about, it pushes USA and China further apart. It gives Trump more power to really evade all trade rules and trade agreements. Never before has a president got involved in something like this. So it is such a bigger question. And when you talk about, how does this affect people? How does this affect advertisers? It doesn't really affect people that much, because if you had it on your phone, you weren't affected whatsoever. It wasn't going to vanish. It was just for new people. But how does it affect advertisers? Well, with this new deal, it probably doesn't affect it that much either. But man, when you think of political and societal and anti-trade and all sorts of things, this is a real hornet's nest that opened and that we allowed. And I read something today that they predict that further involvement and actually cutting off China from actually working in the United States and having companies and ownership of various different things, it could actually cost the U.S. economy $3.5 trillion over the next decade. And the biggest sort of nonsense of this whole thing is that the parent company is still going to be a major minority shareholder in this new U.S. entity. So they're still going to own 20 or 30 or 40%. They're not going to be the majority owner, but it's not like they were removed completely from the equation. So it really does seem like this was all just to get, this was all just to distract people or do something. I don't know what the motive was, but it certainly didn't stop anything. If there was spying, go ahead.
I mean, I can tell you what the motive was, because it might just, what's Occam's law, right? The simplest solution is often the correct one. First of all, before I even go down that rabbit hole, and I feel like an idiot even entertaining all these theories and conspiracy theories. It feels like we're having a chat on National Enquirer's weekly podcast. But first of all, we all read that Trump spoke about wanting to take a cut, some kind of commission for brokering the deal. So let's put that aside for a second. If anyone wants to come back to that, you can. But this may very well be as simple as Trump as a personal vendetta against the fact that TikTok messed up his Tulsa rally by all of these Zoomers.
Exactly.
It wasn't just that, Joe. Joe, it wasn't. It wasn't just that. The TikTok users had organized around actually filling their shopping carts on Trump merchandise websites, and that were run by the campaign. and then abandoning them because they knew that when you abandon a shopping cart, you get inundated with ads. So it's just like they were hitting his pocketbook, not just his rallies. They were
Well,
organizing in big
and
ways
also,
throughout this.
right, and also organizing all of these tickets, right? Booking and buying all of these tickets.
Yeah.
And then of course nobody showed up. So this, I remember years and years ago, very early in my career, I think someone gave me a book. I think it might even have been called Power Negotiating, and I was fascinated by the fact that this book, I mean, went through maybe 10 of the most highest profile negotiations in history. And they all ended up with the same idea of, well, let's just meet halfway. I say 50, you say 100, and they ended up being 75. And that's what I mean by, like, the simplest solution is often the correct one. We can try and complicate and mystify and dissect situations and try and find deeper hidden meaning. But this just seems like an absolute personal vendetta that is, to Saul's point, far-reaching implications on so many levels for so many people across so many industries. It's insane.
Yeah, I think
I have a hard time.
One second, let Wendy.
Okay, go
offer a
Wendy.
thought.
Go Wendy.
Okay, so there's also another perspective to look at it. And, Trump hates Jeff Bezos. And with Walmart coming in and doing this deal with Oracle, right? It's like the e-commerce side of it. I mean, Trump, as much as I think collectively on this podcast don't like him, he thinks, like a rabid businessman. And, if Walmart came in, because Walmart saw the power of the e-commerce thing that happened with Gen Z, basically, right? They see it as a way to reach that generation, which I don't even think is really going to shop at Walmart, but that's besides the point. And Trump now sees it as a way really kind of like getting at the goat of Jeff Bezos also. If there's so many, like you said, there's just so many different elements. There's the political, but for an e-commerce, for Walmart to come in and want to, because, their positioning is basically third-party sellers, right? It's not really about ads. It's about they make a higher margin with their third-party sellers, Walmart does. So it's very complicated. I think it's very smart, actually. Someone is going to get in there and penetrate that younger demographic. And so I think for Walmart, it's a genius move, actually. I just don't know if the younger generation is actually going to shop at Walmart.
Okay, I know that Saul had something to say, and then I want to jump in, but go ahead, Saul.
Well, I was just going to respond to Joe and say I have a hard time believing that the president of the most powerful man in the free world would make something a personal vendetta and not look out for the people of his country. But you say differently. I'm just a Canadian.
Well, I do want to cover I know you touched.
Welcome to America, my friend.
So I know you touched on the subjects of whether or not it would impact the users and whether or not it would impact advertisers. But I wanted to dwell on these two factors because I think that when we think about impact to users, we tend to think negatively. But quite frankly, in my opinion, from what I'm seeing and the way that the TikTok community is hung together and organized so well, if anything, this energizes the TikTok community, doesn't it? I mean, it's just like this whole thing about the president's against us. That's going to charge people to want to join the network and be part of it, isn't it?
I think you're giving people too much credit. There's definitely a percentage of the population that's going to get involved, but like, do 14-year-old girls really are they motivated by the president's actions? Like fair
enough. But 14-year-old girls are
demographic.
14-year-old girls are not the entire demographic of TikTok. I mean, it's just yeah.
But Bob, they're from the age of the younger demographic is very much a part of TikTok, right? It used to be Musical.ly and now it's TikTok, and
right.
It's a very big majority of the people who actually use. You could,
And
Yes,
these people can't be
it is.
political? I mean, because they've already proven themselves to be very political in the way that they've organized, and
Right.
they've done some effective counter programming against the Trump administration. It seems like more people will be attracted like that to the network. I mean, that's what I'm getting from this, that this could be an
Yeah,
energizing
but
moment.
it's gonna get to the point where it can't get too political. You know, look at what Facebook. We're gonna talk about Facebook and Google and the political stuff and the political ads and all of that stuff. And so, the minute TikTok starts getting, super, I don't know, that whole thing is such a mess that we're a bunch of older people trying to examine and understand how younger people of that generation, which is mostly the people on TikTok, it's us older people that are trying to get on freaking TikTok, and we're looking at it. I love these couple of chefs that are on TikTok. The one with the salt, the guy. I like that stuff. It really keeps me engaged and I laugh, but I don't get anything else from it other than it's entertaining. Would I buy a product on TikTok? I don't know. Does anybody?
Well,
You know?
that's the
They
next
probably
part of
do.
this. That's the next part of this. Let's talk about whether or not this
Well, just hold
poisons the
on.
well.
Before you get to e-commerce, I just want to plop one more conspiracy theory down, and then
Because that's what we
make a
need,
point.
another conspiracy theory. Just one more. Come on, give us one
Yeah,
more.
well, just because it's fun. I so maybe let's not call this a conspiracy theory. Let's just call this a question, which is, given the fact that today was meant to be the ban, right? If you hadn't downloaded it, you wouldn't be able to.
Right.
And by the way, iOS 14 also dropped more or less the same time. I wonder whether there was a record number of downloads of TikTok this particular weekend.
It would be
So
interesting.
we won't,
I downloaded it.
yeah,
I downloaded it again just to make sure I
yeah.
had it
So
on my phone.
we won't talk about conspiracy theories in terms of who is behind this rumor, which of course clearly did not materialize and never was going to. But I do want to just make one point, and I think, in all seriousness, as someone who studies consumer behavior, I am fascinated right now by, in political terms, they call it enthusiasm, right? Who stays home and doesn't vote because they don't care, because their vote doesn't count, because they're not interested, because they're not engaged in the political process, and who actually says, I'm going to stand up. Not only am I going to vote, but I'm going to get other people to vote. This idea of energizing the base is really what is coming down, to it in terms of what will sway the election. And whilst I'm not going to continue to go down a political, path, I do think it's interesting because we're looking at whether we call them millennials or Gen Zers or Zoomers, this is a massive group of consumers that has typically been labeled as indifferent, apathetic, self-entitled. And we may very well see a very different shift. And by the way, guys, when we look at what's happened with the, on the Jewish festival of Rosh Hashanah, the passing of Ruth, Bader Ginsburg, again, the question will come down to, and may she rest in peace, the question will be, who does it energize, right? Does it energize the one side to step up and mobilize and pay attention, or does it step up the other, or does it step up both? And I think that's really what it's coming down to. The irony, of course, and then I will shut up, but this is really interesting stuff, is that, anyone who has kids that are on TikTok, you just see them thumbing and swiping and scrolling as if they're absolutely, on some kind of mind altering or sedative or drug. There's no thinking going on. There's no kind of intellect. It's almost like they're being hypnotized. And yet, ironically, here we are talking about the same group of consumers saying, I want my MTV, right? This is the next coming of
That's
I
right.
want my MTV.
That's right.
So,
That's right.
so to me, this is actually a fascinating topic, and that's why this is the best marketing podcast anywhere.
No, thank you.
If I might just say this, I think there's definitely a big difference between Gen Z and millennials. Gen Z are completely a different mindset, and thank God. millennials are more apathetic, right? They're kind of like, tell me what to do and I'll do it, and they'll do it well, but you have to tell them what to do. Gen Z, they're coming up and they're strong and they're looking at this and then, it's the whole, they're the ones that are, I actually am excited about that generation. And as a 65-year-old, I'm super excited about being able to connect that through intergenerational stuff, right? And but so I do think TikTok is important because it's the road, it's the golden path into that demographic. And I think that's what they see, and that's why it has so much
Now,
value.
before we hop off this topic and go to the next one, I do got to bring it back to the e-commerce angle and the advertising angle. Does, a lot of brands were experimenting with this. A lot of agencies were experimenting with the platform, trying to do campaigns, trying to use the advertising that was available to them. Does all this poison the well in any way? Does it make you a little bit more reticent to do some TikTok experimentation, knowing that there's so much volatility surrounding this?
Well, if I had a client and I had a budget, yeah, but no, because I don't.
Volatility shouldn't matter at all. It's where's your target market. If these are your people, advertise them.
Yeah.
If it's not, then it's not even a conversation.
Good answer. Fantastic
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
Well, moving on, an opinion.
One just before you hit that well, there is one other point that I think we do need to just mention, and we don't have to I just want to just state it, which is when talking about WeChat, the actual commerce engine. What do you say?
I was going to say, WeChat. I mean, it's just like I wanted to talk about WeChat too, but we're running out of time. But yeah, WeChat is a huge deal. The fact that they're blocking it in the U.S. I mean, I know all of my students, well, not all of my students, but a large majority of the students that I've taught over the last few years at NYU have all been in the same boat. They are absolutely wed to WeChat. It is the total commerce engine. It's how they communicate. It's everything for them. And to take that away,
China, you can't communicate outside of China. You have to have WeChat if you want to communicate in the U.S.
Well,
if you're in China.
I was going to say, by the way, in addition to the e-commerce angle, in addition to American, Americans, studying here, working here, living here, whatever, sending money back to China, etc. WeChat and apps like WeChat have also been integral, and I will give you both sides to it. One, in terms of the Chinese government being able to maintain some kind of dibs and tracking, because everything is integrated through this one app on so many levels. It's not just messaging, right? It's commerce, but also contact tracing is another huge part of this. And so that's another really interesting aspect in terms of data. So this may not even be about spying and privacy and all the nefarious allegations. This may be just about the fact that China has had better data plan in place and an infrastructure and ecosystem in place. And in this particular case, a certain president without a certain plan or certain strategy or certain national plan saying, well, you know what, if you've got something that may or may not be working, we just don't want, we definitely don't have anything that's working. And so we're just going to make sure that at least we lower the bar rather, for everyone rather than raising ours. Just another conspiracy theory,
another conspiracy theory.
Yeah, kind of like the thing, that's why they should have done the deal with Microsoft, and Bill Gates would have been happy, and we all would have a chip, right? So,
well, we got to move on. We got to move on and talk about Google. An opinion column I read this past week took the position that while Facebook has borne the brunt of public animosity for the way it can be used to influence the public, Google has managed, possibly unfairly, to largely fly under the radar with only occasional accusations levied against it. Look, Wendy, my question is that because Facebook is so much worse than Google, or just that the public doesn't have a firm grip on what Google is up to? What's your thoughts on this? Is this a real situation that Google's flying under the radar? It seems to me like they get called to Washington and get fined by GDPR fines, and it doesn't seem like they're flying under the radar to me, but maybe I'm wrong.
Well, I think it's a totally different. I mean, if we're going to look at it from a consumer's point of view, I don't think any consumer cares about any of that, honestly. Maybe a few do, but okay, let's look at it from a professional side because that's really how we're posing this question. And for me, I think it's completely two different things. Google is Google AdWords, right? Google, as I'm trying, my case in point, example, imagine this. I'm reading the article, right? And I get so distracted by so many ads that are popping up around me. And I'm scrolling through the article. I don't know where it was and on where it was, but you have to scroll down. So it passed the ads and then it kind of reboots itself. And I'm not used to that. I'm not a person that does a lot of reading online. And that started, but I know about it, right? So that started to irritate me as I'm doing research on ads. I'm getting inundated by ads that are irritating the crap out of me that are being served to me more than likely by Google. Okay. But an everyday consumer who's reading a blog or doing, surfing the internet, as they say, they don't realize that all of these ads are absolutely, watch the movie Social Dilemma. You're going to find out and understand very quickly where these ads are coming from and how you're being tracked. Every move you make, everything you do, everything you say, everything you think, everything you say into your Alexa, your Google device or whatever. So that's different than Facebook ads. And Facebook and the political scheme, if we're going to only talk about political ads and Google not being targeted as much as Facebook is being targeted to clean up their political ads, it is also because of the way that Facebook tracks them. And, today I got an email, Bob, and everybody on the call and listening. I got an email from Facebook telling me, after restricting my own Facebook page for since February, that I needed to send them my driver's license because if I wanted to run political ads on my Facebook page, I needed to send them a copy of my driver's license, basically. And I'm like, number one, I'm not doing anything political, right? And no, I'm not going to send you my driver's license. And please don't take my page away again, right? So people are looking, you don't know how to look at Google. You don't know how to look at Facebook. Facebook is completely a different animal than Google. And I think that that's how the oversight committees or whomever is doing this, because obviously it is the Wild West like it was in the direct response days 30 years ago when we had to create our own rules. There was no rules. Self-regulation was key. Well, self-regulation isn't working. So if we want to get a handle on anything that is happening on Google and on Facebook, you have to look at them as two completely different animals and treat them as such and go after them in that way by setting the criteria depending on how they actually serve this
so if I can
Well, so the big difference between the two of them is their definition of what a political ad is.
Exactly. Thank you.
So Google clearly states that their definition of a political ad is anyone who mentions a politician by name. And how they've skirted around it and how Facebook hasn't skirted around it, because Facebook has been a little bit more brash about it, but Google has basically let anybody advertise based on issues and issue-based ads. And you can get people riled up about issues without, actually naming a politician. And I would say that that's actually more dangerous than saying, X number politician is a bad person. Instead, talk about how people are starving and people are this and people are that. That's going to get people really to change. So I sort of mention it as a throwaway. I don't know if you guys have watched that documentary, The Social Dilemma on Netflix,
Right.
but very powerful documentary where they talk about
Right.
They talk about the old adage, if you're not paying for something, you're the product. That doesn't hold up anymore, because what Google and Facebook and Twitter and Pinterest and Instagram and all these people are selling now isn't your data. They're actually selling these advertisers the ability to influence somebody and influence them incrementally, so they can affect political movements and they can affect elections and things like that. They are that powerful right now, and but to crack down on them, television, terrestrial radio, things like that are guided by the FCC, but
Yes.
Facebook and Google and Twitter and all these people aren't. So they set their own rules, and we believe them when they say do no harm or don't be evil or whatever those things are. But they're just as powerful as anybody else out there. So they should all be, like they should all be measured by the same stick.
But they're not.
Well,
But
they're
they're
not,
not.
because Facebook, I think, they're all, doing awful things, but, at least Facebook is a little bit more upfront about things and say, we'll let you do anything. Google's being a little sneakier about things and say, we'll let you do anything. You just have to be a little smarter about it.
So I'm gathering from what you're all saying that Google is getting away light on this, that they really should have a lot more scrutiny put on them in this situation.
Well, but
I don't
see, the thing we haven't mentioned about Google is it all comes down to YouTube.
It all comes down to
YouTube.
money, Saul. It all comes down to
Well,
money. Money.
Everything comes down to money, but money is useless if you don't have a distribution. And I say YouTube is a more powerful distribution method for shaping people's opinions than Facebook. It's like Facebook, they can't Facebook can make me happy, make me sad, push me some ads here and there. But YouTube, their recommendation engine, I go on YouTube and it only thinks I like 4 things in the world, because it tends to be those are the 4 things I talk about or view or whatever. I'm not a heavy YouTube watcher, but man, they can push things in, and there's always 1 or 2 outlier things. Like, YouTube is become an enormous location for misinformation, hate speech, and radical content. I'd say more than Facebook even.
Well,
Absolutely.
they've done there's been a lot of research over the past few years, and if we've covered this on the show before, how YouTube can radicalize people. It's built for radicalization because it suggests you like this video, well, maybe you'll like this video.
You're never supposed to click on anything they want you to click on.
But I don't.
Yeah.
I mean, my question would be, I would ask a question about YouTube, and then I'll make a point about Facebook. I think a question about YouTube is, what percentage of videos that are viewed are coming completely through and directly or even indirectly through the recommendation engine versus, for example,
7
people that seven views, 7 videos, 7 brides for 7 sons. I mean, Saul, that the answer is always 42. So I'm a bit disappointed that you said it was 7, but no, but I mean,
7's more biblical.
How much of a factor is that versus, I think, which is the point with Facebook, there is so much opacity and ambiguity and lack or confusion with respect to disclosure. And remember, we have 2 issues going on, and it's not just about political, right? It's about content, pure content. It's about recommendations and referrals, and then it's about everything from deep faking through a lot of misdirection that's happening. And so and then of course part of that is when there's just blatant lies or alternative facts, whatever the case may be, that they're not being flagged and dealt with appropriately. So I guess, going back to you guys, what is YouTube's? We kind of have an idea of what Twitter's been doing with it. We kind of have an idea with what Facebook hasn't been doing about it. But what is YouTube doing when a piece of content is being put out that has either questionable facts, maybe creative editing, deep faking, or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, but Joe, it's always been a problem on YouTube because YouTube is really like the place where conspiracy theories are born, and they go viral, right? So YouTube is known for its ability to go viral. I think that if you're talking about ads that are on YouTube, it's different than just the YouTube content, maybe. That's 2 things to consider. The other thing to consider is that Google also isn't just YouTube, right? Google is all of these third-party programmatic companies that actually use YouTube AdWords and Google ads and all of that stuff in order to drive what they do. So, all of the ads
Sure.
that are popping up all around you. So it's just on Facebook, you're on Facebook, you're a consumer. I'm on Facebook. I'm trusting Facebook. I'm seeing pretty pictures of, the little puppy my daughter just bought. But over here, I'm seeing this ad that's telling me, Joe Biden is like afraid of wolves. And so I think it's just a different dynamic. And that's why I believe that they just have to they are different. So they do have to be treated maybe differently.
Well, there's a
Oh,
lot.
is it stump the panel?
No, there's a lot to unpack there. I mean, it's a huge issue, and obviously marketers have to pay attention to this because just because Google's getting a fair, a free ride at this moment and not getting the scrutiny that Facebook has right now, it may behoove us as marketers to have the ethics to look a little closer at what kind of tools we're using and whether or not we're potentially accelerating the downfall of Western society, but we'll see. I think that's a bit grandiose, but whatever. I want to move on and talk next about an interesting thought piece that I read this week that posited seasonality may be gone forever. Now, this seems likely to me, Joe, but there's no denying it's going on now, at least. I mean, right now, media buyers, planners, they're looking at the way that the population's moving, and there hasn't been any shift in media usage over the summer, and it doesn't look like there's being any media shift in usage during the fall. And, there used to be these huge media shifts in the way that people got in the car and drove more in the summer, so there'd be more radio advertising, and then you get into the Christmas season and it's just like you got more people out shopping. All that stuff is going to go away this year, and you end up with one long continuous line of people just adopting new media behaviors and holding on to them. And so what I'm asking at this point is, what do you think? Is this loss of seasonal behavior going to continue post pandemic, or is it just something that's happening right now and will eventually go away?
So I actually, when I looked at the source article, I was kind of a little bit, I was a little disappointed because I'm not sure that the word seasonality is the right word to describe this. I think, when I think about seasonality, I think about, I think about literally the idea of weather, temperature, time of year, as opposed to day of week or time of day. But I think if we are thinking broadly and saying, well, the definition of seasonality is all of the above, well then, here's how I would respond to that, Bob. First of all, if we think about television, before we get into radio, if we think about television, that changed a long time ago. That ship sailed a long time ago. The whole, for those people that have studied media or understand about the history of, television advertising, everything, the whole concept of must-see TV and Thursday nights, well, that was all designed around the fact that movies came out on a Friday, amongst other things, and so it was one way to be able to front load or heavy load Thursday night advertising. And the same applied with respect to automotive when new cars were released and when people bought cars. So ultimately, the marketing wizards, created this idea of must-see TV, but it had nothing to do with Thursday nights, and the content had everything to do with not even with advertising and advertisers. So now, if we think about radio for a second, the whole concept of drive time is for now, to your point, completely gone. The idea of rush hour and advertising to people during their lunch break, when they're in their cars. This was the ultimate captive audience when people were typically in their cars driving to work or coming back from work or commuting. Well, that's all gone at the moment, or at least temporarily and maybe permanently changed. And so I think what advertisers have to think about. And remember, now we live in a world of Uber Eats and everything is on demand all the time. So this idea of peaks, or peak and off peak, I think is just being replaced with this constant idea of always on, and on demand and always on. And if you actually apply those two rules, I'm fairly confident to say, even when things return to some semblance of normal, um, always, this idea of what I was just basically saying, this idea of on demand and always on is definitely, going to replace this idea of live, right? Live TV watching and specific peaks during the day. And that's just the way it's going to be.
Oh, it's a good time to be in direct response.
Yeah, tell me about that, Wendy, because I was going to go to you next. I mean, this whole idea of having a just-in-time type audience, that's the whole shift that's going on in the way people are consuming their media. How does this impact you and your business, and how does it potentially teach other businesses how to take advantage of that?
Yeah, thanks, Bob. It is, it's remarkable because I've been, and I have a few people slated for my podcast to interview, after 20, 30 years in direct response. It's like, we started off as the red-headed stepchild, as you know, of advertising and direct response television. And now everything is direct response, right? And even now, because of COVID and the shift that is happening from media buying and media planning and strategies and tactics, we're seeing it's like a rebirth. It's just a complete rebirth. Now, also keeping in mind that it's not so much a rebirth of fulfillment, right? And getting the package to the consumer, but that's all part and parcel of being able to run a really efficient direct response campaign, which is always based on efficiencies to begin with. So, it's a complete rebirth. I am seeing people I've worked with for 20 years, their businesses just explode, from media companies, fulfillment companies, whatever it might be, back end, telemarketing, customer service, because of the direct to the consumer that is only going to continue to increase. So thank you very much.
You're welcome.
So I know you guys are so focused on digital and stuff like that, but this is, if there was ever a cry for people to get back to knowing who their customers were and build relationships, this is it. Like, if you can't actually get them in their cars, and you can't do this, get them in their emails, get them in where they live, and stuff like that. Like, it's, I say this all the time, and I think people probably collectively roll their eyes, but if there was ever a time to go back to community management and building followings and not just try to growth hack your way through, churn and burning, users and stuff like that, this is it right now. Will people go back to offices? Probably one day, but for the most part, things are going to be different. You're not going to find people in the same way. I'm still paying for my SiriusXM subscription, but I'm not sure why, because I haven't used it because I'm not in my car as much as I was and stuff like that. Like, there's going to be huge shifts once people wake up and realize they don't need these things or that things anymore. So it's not going to be the same as it always was. So you have to adapt, like just like anything else. And I think things that have worked really well so far will still work to an extent. But man, there's going to be a whole new things that work. And I think it's going to be a lot of the things that worked 10 years ago before we had all these fancy dashboards and things to play with.
Exactly. You have to, it's always wise, and what you're talking about, Saul, I think, is the lifetime value of that customer. How do we create a very long lifetime value of that customer? So, it's getting the customer and then honoring that customer, developing that relationship so that they continue to buy time over time over time. This is a foundation of direct response television.
Wendy, I was going to say to Wendy and Saul, I mean, basically what you guys are saying, this is not a time to be lazy, and this is not a time to look back on what's worked in the past and what legacy is built into the system. Now is the time to kind of recognize, to your point, Wendy, that the data will guide you,
Right.
but also recognize that it's changing. It's changing all the time.
There's so much more data. I remember, I think it was the first time I was ever on the BeanCast, and I don't know, there was this thing about the Dr. Pepper, and then there was this other thing about me saying, somebody said data, and I said data, or somebody said data and data. So data has always been, and that was 10 years ago. So data has always been the essence of everything that we do in direct response. It just wasn't appreciated 20 years ago, 15 years ago, really 10 years ago, right? Now we can get so much of it that a lot of times nobody really knows what to do with it. But if you know what to look for, and then how to use that to really build your brand and build your engagement with your customer, your lifetime value is the key to your success. And that is what that entire industry is built on. And you can go back time and time and time again using new methods of omni-media, of social media, of all of your different media, which is awesome because you're always continuing to engage with your customer. It's the essence of everything that we do. And that is becoming, I think, very prevalent and very important. And it's the future.
What I like about
actually.
this conversation is that it doesn't rely entirely on a digital solution all the time. I mean, just because your workforce is now just
Right.
all over the place, your audience is located in their homes instead of their offices. They're not commuting. I mean, it opens up all kinds of possibilities for some legacy tactics that maybe have been fallen off the, things that you used to do that you kind of fell out of favor somewhere along the way, like direct mail. I mean, direct mail, let me tell you, in the time of COVID, mail is an experience. You go to the mailbox, it's just like it's your contact with the outside world, It's just like you get cool packages, Direct mail is much more interesting to a person who's locked up than...
Bob, think about what is the Birchbox, all the boxes that are sent out to everybody.
Right, exactly.
That's direct frickin' mail.
Right, exactly. The whole shipping experience is something that can be capitalized on, especially doing business to business marketing to individuals who are no longer in the office. It's just something to think about. But I love the way this conversation played out. I want to hit one more topic before we wrap up here. We've reported on the show about iOS 14. We talked a lot about the problems with it last week, but there's one thing that a lot of people are paying attention to this week, which is the fact that it rats out all kinds of bad behavior on the apps. I mean, every privacy protected feature on the phone that is accessed by any app on the phone must be individually cleared by the user. Now, this seems salacious, it seems like it's a topic that's incredibly salacious, how all these apps are going to be triggering these warnings and users are going to find out just how bad people have been. I don't know about you. I've had iOS 14 on my phone for most of the week. I haven't seen one of these dialogues pop up. Now, I may be, unique and not using enough apps here, but how about the rest of you? I mean, it's just like, are we really worried that a lot of advertisers and marketers were mishandling their apps, or is this?
No, I am.
So I had them pop up, and I chose not to have them track me. But the wording was Facebook or whatever app you want to say, Twitter, would like to connect with other devices on your Wi-Fi network to provide you with more accurate information. I'd say 90% of unsavvy people are going to say, okay. So just because they're calling them out doesn't solve the problem.
Right. There was one feature that they changed, which I thought was really interesting, and I think that it'll be interesting to me to see which apps trigger this. But if you notice that there's this little orange light or a little orange dot that appears in the top right or left corner, depending on your iPhone, whatever model you have. And that signifies that the microphone or the camera is now being accessed. So watch out for that button. I'm interested to see how many apps trigger that.
I haven't seen that at all. And
It has to be
Saul,
face recognition. Do you have an iPhone with face recognition, Joe?
No, it doesn't have to be face recognition.
It doesn't?
I have a,
no. But no, I just haven't seen it yet.
Oh, I
But
thought
I
I read
promise
that.
you, I will report back when I do. But I think Saul, I did see that thing about wanting to communicate with other items on your network, and I thought, well, that probably would have implied other phones on my own Wi-Fi network.
Yeah.
It was very weirdly articulated, and so it seemed innocuous, and so I said, okay. But again, the one thing that I would add, and speculatively, and I think it gets back to the previous topic, I wonder how much of this is really going to be location based and location specific. And right now, people are not that mobile. And I think once that part, I mean, that has always been a big part of being able to assign a specific, geo or very specific location tag to where you were, because of the ability to personalize and customize services and ultimately messaging. So that's going to be very interesting. We may see a lot more of those when we start to get more mobile.
Well, with that, it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul. But before we get to that segment of the show, I do want to take this quick opportunity to thank my guests again and allow them to each do their shameless plug, starting with Mr. Saul Colt. You can find him at theideaintegration.com. That's the home of his company, his consultancy, where he does a lot of work for a lot of people. He's got all kinds of things going on in the hopper, but tell us what's going on in your world, Saul. What can you promote?
So I feel like every time I'm on the show, I say, stay tuned for next week because I have something cool to tell you. So I'll tease a little bit just so it's not a complete waste of my allotted time. But I'm working on a really exciting project in the automobile space. It is, it. Basically, without saying too much, and follow me on all my social media stuff to find out next week. But we're trying to solve one of the most stressful parts of car ownership, and we're not fully revealing what the reveal is yet because we still have a couple little I's to dot and T's to cross to go, but. Coming next week, we'll be releasing, to keep people interested and to keep people curious, a series of guided meditations to keep you calm until we're ready to go. So if that isn't worth checking out my social media, I don't know what is. Car-related guided meditations? Come on, that's genius.
And of course, you can tune in next week in the BeanCast because Saul Month will be continuing. We're going to have him on again next week. But next up, we've got Wendy Cooper. Wendy can be found at wendycooper.com, also cspotrun.com, which is another one of her properties. But tell us, what would you like to promote, Wendy?
So I would really love to promote my website as being C-Spot-Run with the letter C, not S-E-E. It's C-Spot-Run, like my last name, Cooper. And it's Wendy with an I. So you can go to wendycooper.com or cspotrun.com, and you can see my portfolio and everything I do there. You can also see all of my episodes of my website, of my podcast, which is The Wendy Cooper Show, Conversations with Remarkable People. Thank you, Joe Jaffe. It's not remarkable people over 50 because I wanted to have Joe on the show, but he wasn't 50 yet. And my Daily 5. And I would love for everybody to check out my daily 5-minute podcast, especially my latest episode, which is about Ruth Bader Ginsburg and my take on how I hope she affects intergenerational workforces going forward in the future, because I see her as a real force in that respect, but no one is really pointing that out. And that's it. You can get them everywhere you get your podcasts, and you can also, by the way, get it on music, Amazon Music now, so, and Pandora, so, and Alexa. So anyway, there you go.
Sounds good. Sounds fantastic. Last but not least, we have Mr. Joseph Jaffe. You can find him at jaffejuice.tv. That's the home of Corona TV. You can also go to jaffejuice.com, right? And there's all kinds of cool stuff there. So tell us, what's going on in your world? What would you like to promote, Joe?
Well, actually, yeah, probably the better site to find out a little bit more about what I was like pre-pandemic is josephjaffe.com. but post-pandemic, I've been, just ingesting Corona beer all day long or Corona TV all day long. I'm proud to say that all three people on this podcast have been on my show, and they were all amazing conversations, Wendy, Saul, and Bob. Last week, I had Jamal Mashburn, former NBA legend and entrepreneur, and I have to say, I'm just proud of the conversations, because you might think we spoke about basketball, you might think we spoke about, entrepreneurship and him becoming a businessman. We just had a conversation about his childhood, about growing up, about decisions his parents made, and about how he has followed his mother's advice. He has chosen to ignore everything, ignore, his father's path, although he has no bitterness against his father, and now how he's bringing up his son. And I just think, this is a time, and we are in a time right now where hope, positivity, and optimism is
Yep.
discussions about business and marketing, except on the best and the marketing podcast anyway, which is this one. So if you haven't listened to the show, please come and check out coronatv.show. I'm not selling anything. I just, it's become a not even a labor of love. It's just become a joy of love.
Mhm.
And I would welcome anyone who listens to the show to come and join me.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
I
It's a
love
good show.
that. I love that, Joe. I think that's awesome.
As for me, for more information about me or the show, visit thebeancast.com. There you can find a complete show archive. You can find out how to consult with me. And of course, you can find out how to advertise on this program. We could really use an advertiser or a sponsor. So check it all out at thebeancast.com. And now it's time for this week's Fair, Fail, Foul, a rundown of the best and worst of advertising, marketing, and public relations from the last week. First up, the fair. Saul, I love this one. Danish agency Pong created a bus wrap for the World Wildlife Fund that communicates species loss at every stop. Basically, the doors open up and they cover over all the animals. I thought this was pretty clever and pretty brave, considering though everybody's in lockdown. But I guess it's not as locked down in Holland. I'm not sure, but anyway, Denmark, whatever. So, what are your thoughts on this, Saul?
Well, so it's exactly what you said. It's one of those things where, timing, because every time the doors open, they cover these endangered species, but a whole other endangered species would walk out of the bus, people who are riding public transportation during COVID and maybe not wearing masks. So I don't know if it was fully thought through, but it's clever. I liked it.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was definitely a bright spot in the landscape this week. Now, the fail of the week I'm going to give to a Malaysian streaming service called QIY, Wendy. They had the headline Anak Malaysia, which I think is to life for Malaysia, but that's not what it looked like. Even my autocorrect just now when I was typing up this to get ready replaced Anak with anal. So it was Anal Malaysia. This just shows you how important design is.
Well, I think, it's almost like one of those optical illusion things, right? When you're looking at it, you're thinking, like, if you knew that you were looking at Anak Malaysia, maybe you wouldn't have seen the anal Malaysia, right? But because I don't know, I really analyzed it, because I don't know how many situations I've been in where I'm looking at stuff like that, right? And would I have passed that on to the next person, or would I have screamed at the person that designed it, right, and said, "What is this?" I don't know, but I can almost see how it kind of got past everybody, depending on who you were it was being presented to. So anyway, everybody can check it out. It's pretty funny, actually.
I was only half paying attention, and I thought it was the most tasteful representation of anal sex I'd ever seen.
and I'm just intrigued by the fact that Bob's autocorrect is the one that's changing into it. So
it's because of what he types all the time, Joe.
I type about people being anal all the time. Well,
mine, I tried it and mine changed it to mint chocolate chip. So
yeah. Well, last but not least, the foul of the week. The foul of the week is a bad one. The Miami Herald discovered that their Spanish language edition had been running an insert since January that featured a scree of anti-Semitic and racist language. They had a reader after 7-8 months can bring it to their attention, and this is the first that they heard about it. Nobody in management knew that this was going on. This, Joe, just screams like, what the heck were you doing? How did this get by for so long?
Oh man, there's so many directions I could take this in, but instead I'm just going to be able to say I'll be true to myself, and my messaging about the demise of newspapers and magazines, just to say it took them 8 months to figure out they had one reader. So congratulations.
It also proves, that the Jews don't run the media anymore.
I
Or
guess
read newspapers.
We could take it that way as well.
There's the title of the show this week, Bob.
I think not. Well, have a suggestion for this list? Have a suggestion for this list or just want to discuss it? Comment online. Use the hashtag FairFailFoul. That's #FairFailFoul. And that does it for this week's show. If you'd like to subscribe to this podcast, visit our website at thebeancast.com and click on the subscribe link. If you're an Apple Podcast listener, we've also provided a direct link to our listing there, or just search for the BeanCast in the podcast directory on the Apple Podcasts app. And whichever podcast directory you use, when you subscribe, please leave us a review. Got a comment? Have a question? We'd love to hear from you. Just send your emails to beancast@gmail.com. Opening theme was performed by Joe Seibel. Closing theme by C. Jax. Thanks for listening. I'm Bob Norp. We'll be back again next week. Hope you'll join us then.
Like if it's, you know what I mean? I don't know, man. Just like, okay, it's like, you know what I mean? Like, it's like totally like that. It's like, I don't know. Like if it's, it's like, you know what I mean? Yeah, it's just like kind of, it just seems like it's just like almost exactly. It's like exactly. Yeah. You know what I mean? Exactly.
Cool beans.